When working with the DOM, most of the time we deal with the relationship between parent and child elements. That's because the document object model is essentially a tree structure, and inside a tree, there's always a hierarchy. For example, take a look here. We have a div tag, and inside that div, there's an h2 and a ul element. So the children of the div are h2 and ul, right? And this ul itself can have multiple children as well. This is the kind of relationship we'll be working on regularly. To make this kind of work easier, JavaScript gives us some built-in methods and properties. Let me walk you through them one by one. First, let's think about this use case. We have a div, and inside that div, there's an h2 and a ul. So both h2 and ul are children of the div. Then inside the ul, we have multiple li elements, and those are the children of the ul. Makes sense, right? So inside our script.js file, we will write const parent is equal to document.querySelector in the bracket #items. With this line, we have taken the reference of the ul list and stored it in a variable called parent. Now, if I want to get its children, meaning the li elements, I can simply write const children is equal to parent.children. This way, the variable children will hold an array-like collection of all the child elements. Here, children is actually a property of the parent. That's why we can access it using parent.children. And through this children property, we can easily get all the child elements of any parent element. Now, if I do console.log in the bracket children, the console will nicely show a list of all the child elements. And the type of that list will be HTML collection. In a previous video, we saw that an HTML collection looks like an array, but it's not actually an array. However, since it's iterable, we can still run loops on it. If we expand this HTML collection, we will see the children of the parent, meaning the li items. And if you notice carefully, each li element inside our index.html file has a class named transaction-item. If we had simply used querySelector_all in the bracket .transaction-item to take the reference, we would also get all the items, right? Yes, with querySelector_all in the bracket .transaction-item, we could have selected every element with that class, but the problem is it would grab all the elements across the entire page that have the class transaction-item, not just the ones inside our specific ul. Among them, there could be elements that are not actually children of that ul list. Since in our case, we only need the children of the list itself, we will stick to accessing them through parent.children. I hope that makes sense. Now, when we print children in the console, we get an HTML collection, and just like an array, we can also access any specific elements inside it using index numbers. For example, if we want to access the first element, we will write children square bracket 1. After saving the file, you will see in the console that the first element is printed. If we want to access the second element, we will write 2, and that element will be printed. And if we want to access the very last element, inside the square brackets of parent.children, we will write parent.children.length -1. We already know that this is an array. We can find out how many elements it has by using the array.length property. Since parent.children is also an array-like collection, we can use the length property here as well to get the total number of elements. And since arrays are zero index based, subtracting 1 from the length gives us the last element. Save the file and check the browser. We have successfully accessed the last element. Now, let's move on to accessing the grandparent. For that, we will define a variable called const grandparent. Our grandparent is actually the div element, and it has a class assigned to it. The class name is main-content. So we will write const grandparent is equal to document.querySelector in the bracket .main-content. And with this, the reference of the div element will be stored inside the grandparent variable. But keep in mind, since we are querying with a class here, we had to use a dot. Earlier, when we used an ID for the parent, we used a hash. These small details are important to remember because mistakes usually happen right in these parts. Now notice this. To get the parent reference, we don't actually need to write the long document.querySelector in the bracket #items anymore. Instead, we can simply replace it with the grandparent variable. In that case, we will write grandparent.children. Here's the interesting part. Children always return something that looks like an array. Whether there's just one child or multiple, the result will still be in array form. So if I want to access a specific child, I will need to use its index. For example, to grab the UL list, we have to take the second child of the parent because the first child is the H2 element. And for that, we will write children in square brackets 1. Now, if we check the console, you will see output is exactly the same. That means we have successfully accessed all three references, the grandparent, the parent, and the children. Now let's say you want to go directly from the grandparent to its children. We do have the children property, right? But if the structure is deeply nested, does that mean every time we have to start from the grandparent, then go to its parent, then again to its children, moving down step by step using indexes? The simple answer is no. Yes, you can technically access children using array indexes, but it's prone to mistakes. And if the number of children is large, that's definitely not a smart approach. The solution is that you can go directly from the grandparent to its child if you want. This is called accessing a descendant. Suppose I want to skip the parent step, meaning I don't want to grab the parent separately but directly access the child from the grandparent. How can we do that? Think about it. Our grandparent variable is actually the div element with the class main-content, right? So the grandparent is this div, and everything inside it is what I want to reach. Basically, I want to move straight to the descendants, and we can easily do that. Earlier, we saw that if I use document.querySelectorAll, it will return every matching element from the entire document. But if I use grandparent.querySelectorAll in the bracket .transaction-item, then I will only get the elements with the transaction item class that are inside the grandparent. And the output will be exactly the same. That's exactly what I wanted to show you. If we want to move to a descendant, we don't have to follow every step in between, one by one. We can directly access it this way. So far, we have been moving from the top down, meaning from the grandparent to the parent, and then to the child. Now let's look at the reverse direction, going from bottom to top. In other words, until now, we were going from parent to child. But what if we want to go from child back to parent? That's what we will explore next. For that, I am clearing out all the previous code. Let's say we create a new variable like this. Const children is equal to document.querySelector in the bracket .transaction-item. What will this actually grab? Yes, it will grab the list item or li item. And since we used query selector, it will only return a single element. Now, if I want to move forward and get its parent, I will need to grab the ul. To do that, we can write const parent is equal to children.parentElement. Just like earlier, we used the children property to access child elements. Here, we will use the parent element property to access the parent. So this way, we can easily get the parent as well. If I now do console.log in the bracket parent, you will see in the browser console that we have got the ul element. Very clear, right? That means we can move upward just as easily as we can move downward. And just like we saw earlier with descendant access, we can also go upward directly if we want. For example, suppose you want to go from a child straight to the grandparent without passing through the parent. JavaScript has a great method for exactly that. If you want to go from a child directly to its grandparent div, and that div has the class main-content, then we will write const grandparent is equal to children.closest and in the bracket .main-content. This way, we immediately get the reference of the grandparent div. The closest method works a lot like query selector, but the difference is that query selector goes downward from the top, while closest goes upward from the bottom. Starting from the element with the class transaction-item, it keeps moving upward and checks if it finds an element with the class main-content. Now, if I do console.log in the bracket grandparent, you'll see that our parent div shows up right away. And this is what we call the closest ancestor. So, by now, the behavior of the closest method should be clear to you. The last thing left for us to explore is elements that sit side by side. So far, we have only looked upward and downward, parents, grandparents, and children. But now, let's look at brothers and sisters, meaning siblings. Let's say we rename what we previously called children to children1. So, children1 now refers to a specific child. If I want to grab the one right next to it, basically its next brother or sister, I can do that by accessing its sibling. So, if we write const children2 is equal to children1 dot next element sibling, and then console.log in the bracket children2, we will see the children2 element nicely printed in the console. Right now, just seeing it in the browser console doesn't make it very clear which child element we are working with. So let's do something simple. If we apply a little style to children2, it will stand out visually in the browser. For that, we write children2.style.backgroundColor is equal to dark green. After saving, you will notice that the second list item, children2, now has dark green text. So we have seen that with siblings. We can use next element sibling to move to the next element. In the same way, we can also go from children2 back to its previous sibling. For that, we will create another variable named previous children and write const previous children is equal to children2.previous element sibling. This gives us the element before children2, which is children1. Now, if we apply previous children.style.backgroundColor is equal to dark red, the text of children1 will turn dark red, while children2 will remain dark green just as it was before. Now, everything should be clear. Now I hope you have understood how DOM traversal works. I have shown you each direction step by step, top to bottom, bottom to top, and finally walked you through some useful techniques for quickly navigating between parent and child when there's a hierarchical relationship. Not just parent and child, we can also traverse ancestors, descendants, and even siblings, both previous and next. And the best part is, all of this can be done entirely with vanilla JavaScript. In the past, we often depended on libraries like jQuery for this, but in reality, vanilla JavaScript makes it simple enough on its own. Hopefully, all of these concepts are now crystal clear to you. You will need to keep practicing these DOM traversal concepts again and again because it's very normal to forget them when you're just starting out. That's why I have created a DOM traversal cheat sheet on our Logic Base Labs page. Everything we covered in this lesson, plus a few extra topics you can explore on your own, are all included in that cheat sheet. You can use it as a reference while practicing. The link will be provided in the video description. And one request, please don't forget to hit the follow button on the page. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. It won't cost money, but will help me a lot to reach wider audiences and spread my valuable learning resources. Now, let's move on to the next lesson.